Hello, I'm Meredith Coleman McGee, member of the Learning Tree Book Club in Jackson, Mississippi. Charlemagne. Marianne, we're live.
Hello, welcome to the Learning Tree Book Club. I'm Mariam Yusuf. And I'm Salma Yusuf.
Thank you. And which one of y'all is gonna start reading first?
I'm going to start first.
Gonna start, okay, you read your poem and tell us the name of it.
So today I'm going to be reading some of my poems that I made over the summer about me starting sixth grade next week.
Now tell me the name of the first one. I'm gonna put it in the chat.
The first one is called Brand New Start.
Brand New Start. Okay, I typed it in there.
New school year and a brand new start, a year in which we will all take part. So buckle up and off we'll go. There are so many things we want to know. Now that we are in primary 6, new things will be added and learning mix. Difficult things will be added to learning mix, difficult calculations, forms of writing. Each term will be so exciting. I think that as a classroom plan, our motto should be, yes, we can. So let's begin, commence, get cracking. Just remember, there should be no slacking.
Okay, now I'm gonna take a second. We have a new reader, and welcome to Learning Tree Book Club. Can you introduce yourself?
Yes. Hello, I'm Jackie, and this is my son Jacob, and my daughter Ava's coming in a little bit, and we've just joined from Hampshire in England.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you so much. How did you hear about the Learning Tree Book Club?
I was just looking for a book club for parents and children, and so I was on the Eventbrite site and just came across it there.
Wonderful. So your son's name is?
Jacob.
Jacob, what grade did you just advance to?
I'm going into well, in England we call it like years, so I'm in year 7 right now, but I'm going into year 8.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, so usually we let the younger readers read first. Mariam just read a poem that she wrote this summer. She has actually written 8 poems over the summer. So she stopped reading other books and reads her own poetry now. But she and her younger sister, Solomon, they're reading from Tennessee. And
Oh, wow.
I'm reading from Mississippi. We're Southerners in the United States. And so is Vic. Oh my goodness, we have another reader. Well, tell us your name.
Ava.
Okay, and what grade did you advance to?
You're going to year
6.
Year 6. Let her know she can't hear you. They're going to year 6.
I'm going into year 6.
And has school started for you all?
No.
Okay.
They start at the beginning of September.
Oh, okay. Because it starts Monday for Miriam and Solomon. Okay, so Solomon, who is going to the 3rd grade, is reading next, and then your 2 children can read, and then and we usually do 5 minutes. Sometimes if it's a picture book, you can read the whole book. But if they're reading a chapter book, we'll stop it at 5 minutes, and then we'll let them give a summary, or we'll ask them a question about what they read, the characters, or people in the story. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Now you're members, of course. Learn your book. Can't let you go. Thank you. Okay, so Solomon, what you got, girl?
I got Oprah Winfrey.
Oh, you read the book about Oprah. That's a chapter book, right?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Dear readers, as Sally Ride and Martin writes, Eldman both powerfully said, "You can't be what you can't see." When Sally Ride said that, she meant that it was hard to dream of being an astronaut, like she was, or as a doctor, an athlete, or anything at all if you didn't see someone like you already had lived that dream. She especially was talking about seeing women in jobs that historically were held by men. I wrote this first, she percent, and the books that came after it because I want young girls and children of all genders to see women who works hard to live their dreams. And I want all of us to see examples of pers- persistence in face of different challenges to help inspire us in our own lives. I am so thrilled now to be partner with a sisterhood of writers to make more in-depth versions of these stories of women persistence and achievement to readers. I hope you enjoyed this chapter book as much as I do to find them inspiring and empowering. And remember, if anyone tells you no, if anyone ever says your voice isn't important or your dream is too big, remember these women. They pursue and so should you. Warmly, Chelsea Chibla. Chapter 1. Every person is born with a talent. Oprah Winfrey always loved telling stories. When she was a young girl, she didn't have a lot of money or a lot of fancy clothes, but she had her voice, and she used her voice in big and small ways. Oprah used her voice to tell stories to anyone and everything that would listen, especially to the animals on the farm in her small Mississippi town. Oprah considered the chickens and piglets her friends. She named them each one and told them stories as she fed them. Sometimes she even made up grand tales, or other times she retold the sermons she heard at church. Oprah was good at remembering what the pastor said on Sunday morning, and she was good at memorizing the scriptures her grandmother taught her.
That's a beautiful drawing of Oprah Winfrey.
By the age of 3, Oprah was able to read. She loved reading and speaking words, and people all around town loved hearing her. No one knew that one day she'll be called Queen of Talk. No one knew that one day her voice would be heard all over the world. Oprah was born in Castle Co- I don't know this word.
Hold it up so I can see it. Which word is it? Bonita? Oh, Kosciuszko. That's where my mother was born. Kosciuszko in Taylor County, Mississippi.
Kosciuszko, Mississippi. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mississippi on January 29, 1954. Her parents were not married. Her mother, Verna Lee, was 18 years old. Her father, Vernon Winfrey, was away serving in the United States Army. They named her Oprah after a woman in the Bible. People often mispronounce her name, switching the R and the P. So instead of correcting them, she took the name Oprah. Verna wanted to create a better life for her daughter. She did not want to raise Oprah in the Sacred South, where Black people did not have equal rights. Black people could not drink out of the same water fountains as white people, and some restaurants only welcomed white customers. There were so many businesses that wouldn't hire Black people. Vernetta moved to Milwaukee, Wisconsin to find work.
We're gonna have to come to a stopping point so we can have another reader. Hold up. Tell us something about the story that inspires you at your age and what you learned about so far Oprah Winfrey in this book. And the book is called She Persisted.
Yes, so I learned that just because somebody says no to you, other people says no to you, that doesn't mean you can't stop following your dreams.
Oh, very good. Very good. Yeah, I'm gonna keep dreaming too. All right, so which one of you are gonna read now? And can you type your name in the chat and reintroduce yourself before you read and hold up the spine of your book so the audience can see what you're reading.
Okay. I'll type. Jacob, you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'll go first.
Okay, cool.
Okay. Jacob is going first, and then Ava.
Yeah, go and share the title of the book, Jacob.
Right, yeah, so the title of the book is Stories. The title of the book is Stories of the First World War.
Oh, okay. Stories of the First World War.
By Jim Eldridge.
And that's a chapter book. That's a big book. Okay.
You can sit down.
Thank you.
Right, so yeah, I'm reading from chapter 1, and the chapter is called Horses, Swords, Lances, and Machine Guns.
Okay.
Right, so 24th of August 1914, 14-year-old Jules Borchardt and his best friend Edgar Rome lay behind the grass hillock. Hidden from the view, let me have a turn, whispered Edgar, desperate to get a look through the binoculars. In a second, whispered Jules. They're my binoculars, remember? In fact, officially, they belong to Jules' uncle Maurice, who claimed that his brother Paul, Jules' father, had left him to him after he died. Jules had protested and even angrily challenged his uncle to prove his claim to the precious binoculars. The result had been an angry outburst from Uncle Maurice, furious at Jules calling him a liar. Finally, the priest had been called to intervene, pointing out that it had been a tense time for everyone, with poor Boar child killed by the Germans while defending his country. And this unhappy row was just an expression of the anguish the family was feeling. Uncle Maurice had not been mollified, but he did his best to hide his hurt feelings. After all, it was the priest who had spoken. For his part, Jules was not happy either, as far as he was concerned. Wait a second. His uncle had stolen the precious binoculars that should, by rights, have been his. Eventually, a compromise had been arrived at, again broken by the priest. After urging from Jules' mother, Jules could borrow the binoculars from his uncle for 1 day a week, provided he always returned them in a good condition. Today was one of the days, and it was the day but arrived just a few days earlier, seemed to be making preparations to launch an attack against the despised Germans. The men who had murdered his father. Please, let me have a turn, begged Edgar. Reluctantly, Jules handed the binoculars to Edgar, who pressed them to his eyes. From their position, they could see both camps, British and German, and both set off cavalry. But they had chosen a spot nearer to the British camp, determined that if they were caught by watchers, they would be caught by the Allies and not the hated people. The sight of the British cavalry filled Jules with delight. They looked magnificent with their superb tall horses and the point of their lances glinting in the sun. And there were hundreds of them, hundreds and hundreds. They will smash the Boche. He muttered to himself. They will go through the German ranks like knives through butter. They will dive them out. Belgium will be out again, free from a hated enemy. The field will be soaked in German blood, and his father would be avenged. What's happening? He demanded. Let me have them back. I've only just started looking through them, complained Edgar. Well, what you can see is anything happening. Oh, the soldiers getting on their horses yet. The two with the most gold braid on their uniform are talking, reported Edgar. Talking, snorted George indignantly. Why are they attacking? I expect they're planning their attack, said Edgar. Like I say, those two look like him. Those two look like they're the ones in charge, so I think it will be happening soon. Come on, you've had your turn, said Jules impatiently. Let me have a go. Edgar sighed and handed the binoculars back to Jules. Jules pressed them into his eyes and focused on the two cavalrymen Edgar had described. Yes, they did look like officers with gold braid on their sleeve. These must be the men in charge. But what were they saying to one another? For heaven's sake, David, you know I would follow you anywhere at this time, but this is suicide. Lieutenant Colonel David Campbell looked coldly at his second in command, an old comrade in arms, Archie Wilson. Suicide, he mocked. We are the 9th Lancers. That's what we do. We charge the enemy lances and swords and cut them down. How many times did we do it in South Africa against the Boers, winning each and every charge? The Boers were farms with single-shot rifles. These Germans are different. They are men on horses with lances and swords and revolvers, the same as us. And behind them arose a German machine gun. They won't fire for the fear of hitting their own men. And once we've gone through the Boche lines, what then? Campbell scowled, hesitated, then admitted, yes, all right, Charlie. The same thought occurred to me, and I raised it with the old man. I suggested that after the first charge, once we've gone through the German lancers and we get near their guns, we out to adopt the strange strategy of Bob Baden's Powell's brought in the 5th Dragoons dismount and engage them with rifle fire. And what did he say? What do you think? Virtually accused me of cowardice. Breathing, thinking about it, started to blast me for sullying the image of the Lancers. The Lancers are horse soldiers, my boy. Honour the memory of charge of the Lance of the Light Brigade. Archie let out a sigh and shook his head. An unfortunate example, he said slowly. As I recall, nearly all the Lancers were killed by the Russian guns in this particular charge. Yes, well, I started to make that point, but the old man just reminded me that I was an officer, and that officers obeyed orders as well as soldiers. The old man, the general. That was one of the problems with the organisation of this war, reflected Campbell. This was going to be a modern war. There was talk of fast machine guns and aircraft, but over half of the top brass, field marshals and generals running of the war on Allied side, were former cavalrymen and still thought of the war as being waged by men on horses with swords and lances. Field Marshal John French, one of the two commanders of the British Expeditionary Force in France, was a former cavalryman in the 19th Hussars, and the other commander, Field Marshal Douglas Haig, had been a cavalryman in the 7th Hussars. To even suggest to these two men that the cavalrymen fight on foot was seen as something not done. What do your men say, Archie? Asked Campbell. Archie shrugged. The men will follow you, sir, as they always have done. They believe in you. He gave a weary smile. Some of them think you're a good luck charm. Certainly the ones who were fighting with us were, and that word spreads among the good new chaps, so moral is hard. Good, nodded Campbell. In that case, better get them mounted up and in order. And the sooner we get stuck into the bush and show them we mean business, the better. And the German machine guns, we put them out of action, said Campbell. Cut down their gunners, lances and swords and revolvers. By the time we're through the German cavalry, with luck the machine guns won't have had time to get themselves organised.
So in about a minute, I try to get to an end of a paragraph so we have a stopping point, Jacob.
Try to get to the end of the paragraph.
You go ahead and read the next paragraph.
Right. Archie said nothing, but Campbell could tell from this look on his old pal's face that he felt this was highly unlikely, and he knew that the Campbell felt the same way. The Germans were highly organised, highly trained, with machine guns would be poised and waiting. And first they had to get past the German cavalry, who proudly boasted they were the finest cavalry unit in Europe. Well, it was time to put that boast to the test. Orders are orders, Archie. And Campbell simply, and this is war. Archie snapped to attention and gave a sharp salute. Yes, sir, he said briskly. I'll prepare the men. As Campbell watched Archie walk away, he remembered the previous times they'd ridden into battle together. In India, but mostly in South Africa against the Boers and the Boer War. And even then, there hadn't been a walkover. These so-called Dutch farmers, armed only with pigforks and single-shot rifles, had held off the might of the British Army on more than one occasion, and now they were about to face the Uhlans and then the guns. Captain Walter Obster stood surveying the scene through his field glasses. He was grateful he had decided to pay more money and buy the best field glasses. They afforded him a view of the British camp far away across the open ground fields, where he could see the British cavalry soldiers preparing their mounts. Captain observed, lowered his field glasses and turned to Lieutenant Graff, who had appeared beside him and was standing as stiff as a ramrod, hand fixed.
To the end of the paragraph? Oh, so it's stopped there.
I am on the.
At the end of the
Okay.
paragraph.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, Jacob, thank you for
Yes.
that story. Now I want to see Miriam, Solomon, and Ava. Do you have a question to ask him about what he read? Or did anything he read stick out to you about stories of the First World War?
Any questions, Jim?
Anybody else? Okay, I have a question.
Yeah.
Stories of the First World War. Is this a true story about World War I?
Yeah. Yes.
And
Yes, ma'am.
who are the main characters in this story, and where does this story take place? Because I heard you mention South Africa and Britain.
But like no, there's no main characters. It's like 12 different stories like split up.
This is the first one.
So this is the first story in the book.
And who are the main who are the main people that
The
you
main
have?
characters.
Yeah.
Their main characters in this story, like like Jules Borchardt and his friend Edgar and his uncle Maurice.
Those are the main
So they were soldiers?
No, they were 14 years old.
Oh, okay, they were 14 years old, but they saw the onset of the war.
Yeah, we're watching they'll use binoculars so they could see the
And where were they watching from?
they were watching it from binoculars
from where?
from their house. No. From a from
It doesn't say. It did? From the hilltop.
from a hilltop.
In what city and country?
What place?
What place?
What country?
In England.
Oh, in England. Okay, and I have one other question. Now, we're in the United States, and it's 2:30 p.m. here in the evening. What time is it in England?
What is it actually? It is 8:30.
8 p.m.?
Yeah, 8:30, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so you all are
6 hours ahead.
Yeah.
5.5 hours ahead of us. Yeah, and Marianne and them is 1 hour ahead of us there. It's 3:30 where they live in the United States. Well, that's interesting. I just had to ask that. Well, thank you so much for that. And I enjoy your reading, and I love your accent. Okay, Miss Ava, what are you reading? And you can hold it up for us.
Yes.
I'm reading The Great Shelley Holmes Midsummer.
The Great Shelby Holmes.
Shelby.
Yes, Shelby Holmes needs so much.
And the author is Elizabeth Ilberg.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Ava, I'm 10 years old. Introduce yourself.
I'm Ava and I'm 10 years old.
Thank you.
Chapter 1. You would think having a friend who knows it all would be annoying. And okay, at times it really, really is. But it can be also fascinating and extremely helpful, especially if it's your first day at a new school. I see Sasha's parents didn't take her to Grace like they promised. Shelby remarked as we walked down the hallway at the Holland Academy of Arts. I followed her gaze to a white girl with blonde hair and a ponytail. There was absolutely nothing about this girl that would led a normal person to think that Sasha didn't go on some family vacation. But while Shelby Holmes was many things, normal wasn't one of them. How do you? I began to ask before she cut me off. Like it isn't obvious, she replied with a laugh. A teacher standing outside a classroom looked up from a folder as he and Shelby. As soon as he saw Shelby, he quickly turned around, went to his classroom and closed the door. The only thing that seemed obvious to me was that there was a path being cleared for Shelby as she walked. I'd learned a few things from Shelby in the 3 weeks I'd known her. One was to make deductions based on people's behaviour. Right now, I was deducting that nobody in the school wanted Shelby to do that thing that she did, me included. I also learned to listen to everything she says, and that she was always right. Well, she kept spilling the secrets of our classmates and teachers as we continued down the hall. I looked around my new school. From the outside, it seemed like a standard school building, red bricks and nothing special. But as soon as we stepped inside, it was something that I hoped, it's everything I hoped a school focused on the arts would be. The walls were covered with student work, music filled the halls, and there was tryout flyers up for the autumn term musical. There was even an entire glass display case filled with books, but they weren't regular. Books found in other schools. These were the yearly authorized of anthologies the Academy put out featuring the best student writing. Someday I'll be in there, I hoped. Yeah, I could totally get used to a place like this. I had 2 classes where I got to focus on my writing. 2! And I was going to be staying here. No more moving for the Watsons. We were making New York City our home. Of course, that meant I really needed to make a good first impression, since I'll be sticking around. I was used to being a new kid. I was used to being the new kid. I mean, I spent all 11 years of my life moving from army post to army post, but this was my last day as the new kid at a place. It was different. Shelby grunted, which brought me back to her orientation of my new classmates. Like it isn't abundantly apparent, she got kicked out of camp this summer. Who are you talking about? I glanced around the hallway. Watson, she said with a disapproving shake on her head. What have I been telling you about observing? I've been observing, but it would help if you could tell me how you knew these things. Or you know, start with who you're even talking about. My eyes swept my fellow classmates to find a clue about anything having to do with anyone at this point. I kept observing the same thing as Shelby. I could never see what she saw. Fine, she said with a groan. Her hand flew up and pointed to 3 girls talking by a locker. Do you see how 2 of the girls have matching homemade rope bracelets? Standard last day of camp fair. Pretty uninspiring, if you ask me. Charlotte's not only missing one, but notice the lack of color on her, unlike the other two. Yeah, the other two girls were more tanned or whatever, but that could mean anything. How on earth did Shelby come up with with someone being kicked out of camp? Okay, I technically knew how she did by deductive reasoning, but that didn't mean I fully understood it. What Shelby's been trying to teach me to do is assemble a list of likely scenarios based on observations, and then decide which opinion fits, and then decide which option fits best. In the case of these three girls, the only scenario I had was that one of them was three girls. The only scenario I had was that just one of them used sunscreen. Shelby took a silence as ignorance.
Can you come to a stopping point? Hey, you can finish the paragraph.
I had to listen to them blather on and on. I had to listen to them blather on and on last year about the horseback riding camp. Say the missing markers of attending. Said camp for extended period was glaring obviously on Charlotte. That's finished.
Okay, thank you so much. Now I'm going to ask the school-age children, can you relate to anything that Shelby was going through in terms of her first day of school?
Oh, sorry.
Uh-huh. Okay, go ahead. Miriam, are you trying to say something?
Yeah. I was going to say that on my first day of school, I was really nervous because I've never met anybody there. And it was really chaotic in my first class, and I didn't know what to do. I was so embarrassed because I was just standing in the middle of the classroom, not knowing what to do.
Oh, wow. What about you, Solomon?
I've been very nervous to ever enter a class on my first day because the teacher is nice, but it's like awkward because I'm usually the first one to be inside the classroom.
And what about you, Jacob?
What was the first day of school? It was good, yeah.
Oh, you liked it, huh?
Yeah, I walked into the doors and then, yeah, just got told by teachers and stuff like following everywhere, and then we had to like go to like some place and then we had to do our logins and everything and stuff. We made some friends.
Oh, wow, on the first day? Okay. Okay, so Ava, tell us as the reader, what about Shelby Holmes' first day of school you could relate to?
I can relate because I'll be like a little bit nervous because I won't really know anybody. So I'll be like nervous because I wouldn't really know anyone and I'll just be there. And I won't really have any friends to play with at first, but then later I can like make friends.
Okay.
Yes.
That's it. And my observation is that the girls kind of had a similar experience. And Jacob, the only boy going to school, his experience was like It was a fun day. But anyway, hopefully over time you'll meet new people and you have the kind of fun that Jacob had in his birthday. Okay, so Mom, Jackie, what are you reading?
Wow. 21 speeches that shaped the world,
Oh, okay.
by Chris Abbott. Chris Abbott. I'm just going to read a part from the first section. It's a speech by a lady called Emmeline Pankhurst, and she was an activist for women's right to vote
Where?
here in England.
Okay. And what was her last name?
Pankhurst, Pankhurst. And so there's a little introduction that says, throughout the early 1900s, the struggle for women's rights hinged on suffrage, which is the right to vote. Some of the first countries to allow women full voting rights were British colonies, such as New Zealand in 1893 and Australia 1902, although Aboriginal women were not given the vote till 1967. However, at that time, women in Britain, and indeed most other countries, were denied the right to vote in national elections. Pankhurst came from a family with a history of radical politics, and her husband was a strong advocate for women's rights until his death in 1898. So Pankhurst moved to London in 1907 to join her daughters in the militant struggle for the vote. And so I'll start reading from a speech that she made in Hartford, Connecticut, in the United States.
Okay.
And it says on 13 November 1913, and it reads, many people come to Hartford to address meetings as advocates of some reform. Tonight, it's not to advocate a reform that I address a meeting in Hartford. I do not come here as an advocate because whatever the position the suffrage movement may occupy in the United States of America, in England, it has passed beyond the realm of advocacy and it has entered into the sphere of practical politics. It has become the subject of revolution and civil war. And so tonight, I'm not here to advocate women's suffrage. American suffragists can do that very well for themselves. I am here as a soldier who has temporarily left the field of battle in order to explain. It seems strange that it should have to be explained what civil war is like when civil war is waged by women. I am not only here as a soldier temporarily absent from the field of battle, I am here, and that I think is the strangest part of my coming. I am here as a person who, according to the laws, courts of my country, it's been decided is of no value to the community at all. And I am adjudged because of my life to be a dangerous person under sentence of penal servitude in a convict prison. So you see, there is some special interest in hearing so unusual a person address you. I dare say, in the minds of many of you, you will perhaps forgive me this personal touch, that I do not look either very like a soldier or very like a convict, and yet I am both. Now, first of all, I want to make you understand the inevitableness of revolution and civil war, even on the part of women. When you reach a certain stage in the development of a community's life, it's not at all difficult if revolutionaries come to you from Russia, if they come to you from China, or from any other part of the world, if they are men, to make you understand revolution in 5 minutes. Every man and every woman to understand revolutionary methods when they are adopted by men. Many of you have expressed sympathy, probably even practical sympathy, was revolutionaries in Russia. I dare say you have followed with considerable interest the story of how the Chinese revolutionary Sun Yat-sen conducted the Chinese Revolution from England. It's quite easy for you to understand. It would not be necessary for me to enter into explanations at all. The desirability of revolution, if I were a man, in any of these countries, even in a part of the British Empire known to you as Ireland. If an Irish revolutionary had addressed this meeting, and many have addressed meetings all over the United States during the last 20 or 30 years, it would not be necessary for that revolutionary to explain the need of revolution beyond saying that the people of his country were denied, and by people meaning men, were denied the right of self-government. That would explain the whole situation. If I were a man and I said to you, I come from a country which professes to have representative institutions and yet denies me, a taxpayer, an inhabitant of the country, representative rights, you would at once understand that that human being a man, was justified in the adoption of revolutionary methods to get representative institutions. But since I'm a woman, it is necessary in the 20th century to explain why women have adopted revolutionary methods in order to win the rights of citizenship. You see, in spite of a good deal that we hear about revolutionary methods not being necessary for American women, because American women are so well off, most of the men of the United States quite calmly acquiesce in the fact that half of the community are deprived absolutely of civil citizen rights. And we women, in trying to make our case clear, always have to make as part of our argument and urge upon men in our audience the fact, a very simple fact, that women are human beings. It's quite evident you do not all realize we are human beings, or it would not be necessary to argue with you that women may, suffering from intolerable injustice, be driven to adopt revolutionary methods. We have, first of all, to convince you we are human beings. And I hope to be able to do that in the course of the evening before I sit down. Suppose the men of Hartford had a grievance, and they laid that grievance before their legislature, and the legislature obstinately refused to listen to them or to remove their grievance. What would the proper and the constitutional and the practical way of getting their grievance removed be? Well, it's perfectly obvious at the next general election, when the legislature is elected, the men of Hartford, in sufficient numbers, would turn out that legislature and elect a new one, entirely change the personnel of an obstinate legislature, which would not remove their grievance. It's perfectly simple and perfectly easy for voting communities to get their grievances removed if they act in combination and make an example of the legislature by changing the composition of the legislature and sending better people to take the place of those who have failed to do justice. But let the men of Hartford imagine that they were not in the position of being voters at all, that they were governed without their consent being obtained, that the legislature turned an absolutely deaf ear to their demands. What would the men of Hartford do then? They couldn't vote the legislature out. They would have to choose. They would have to make a choice of two evils. They would either have to submit indefinitely to an unjust state of affairs, or they would have to rise up and adopt some of the antiquated means by which men in the past got their grievances remedied. We know what happened when your forefathers decided that they must have representation for taxation many, many years ago, when they felt they couldn't wait any longer, when they laid all the arguments before an obstinate British government that they could think of, and when their arguments were absolutely disregarded. When every other means had failed, they began the Tea Party at Boston, and they went on until they had won the independence of the United States of America. This is what happened in the old days. Well, now I want to argue with you as to whether our way is the right way. I want to explain all these things that you've not understood. I want to make you understand exactly what our plan of campaign has been, because I have always felt that if you could only make people understand, most people's hearts are in the right place, and most people's understandings are sound, and most people are more or less logical. If you could only make them understand. I'm going to talk later on about the grievances, but I want to first of all make you understand that this civil war carried on by women is not the hysterical manifestation which you thought it was, but was carefully and logically thought out. And I think when I have finished, you will say, admitted the grievance, admitted the strength of the cause, that we could not do anything else, that there was no other way, that we had either to submit to an intolerable justice and let the women's movement go back and remain in a worse position than it was before we began, or we had to go on with these methods until victory was secured. And I want also to convince you that these methods are going to win. Because when you adopt the methods of revolution, there are two justifications which I feel are necessary or to be desired. The first is that you have good cause for adopting your methods in the beginning. And secondly, that you have adopted methods which, when pursued with sufficient courage and determination, are bound in the long term to win. Now, it would take too long to trace the course of militant methods as adopted by women, because it's been about 8 years since the word militant was first used to describe what we're doing. It's about 8 years since the first militant action was taken by women. It was not militant at all, except that it provoked militancy on the part of those who were opposed to it. When women asked questions in political meetings and failed to get answers, they were not doing anything militant. To ask questions at political meetings is an acknowledged right of all people who attend public meetings. Certainly in my country, men have always done it. And I hope they do it in America, because it seems to me that if you allow people to enter your legislatures without asking them any questions as to what they're going to do when they get there, you are not exercising your citizen rights and your citizen duties as you ought. At any rate, in Great Britain, it is a custom, a time-honored one, to ask questions of candidates for Parliament and ask questions of members of the government. No man was ever put out of a public meeting for asking a question until Votes for Women came onto the political horizon. The first people who were put out of a political meeting for asking questions were women. They were brutally ill-used. They found themselves in jail before 24 hours had expired. But instead of the newspapers, which are largely inspired by the politicians, putting militancy and the reproach of militancy, if reproach there is, on the people who had assaulted the women, they actually said it was the women who were militant and very much to blame. How different the reasoning is that men adopt when they're discussing the cases of men and those of women. Had they been men who asked the questions, and had those men been brutally ill-used, you would have heard a chorus of reprobation on the part of the people toward those who refused to answer those questions. But as these were women who asked the questions, it was not the speakers on the platform who would not answer them who were to blame, or the ushers at the meeting. It was the poor women who had had their bruises and their knocks and scratches, and who were put into prison for doing precisely nothing but holding a protest meeting in the street after it was all over. We were determined to press this question of the enfranchisement of women to the point where we were no longer to be ignored by the politicians, as had been the case for about 50 years, during which time women had patiently used every means open to them to win their political enfranchisement. We found that all the fine phrases about freedom and liberty were entirely for male consumption, and that they did not in any way apply to women. When it was taxation without representation is tyranny. when it was taxation of men without representation is tyranny. Everybody quite calmly accepted the fact that women had to pay taxes and even were sent to prison if they failed to pay them. Quite right. We found that government of the people, by the people, and for the people, which is also a time-honored liberal principle, was again only for male consumption. Half of the people were entirely ignored. It was the duty of women to pay their taxes and obey the laws and look as pleasant as they could under the circumstances. In fact, every principle of liberty enunciated in any civilized country on earth, with very few exceptions, was intended entirely for men. And when women tried to force the putting into practice of these principles for women, then they discovered that they had come into a very, very unpleasant situation indeed. Well, whether you like our methods or not, we have succeeded in making women's suffrage one of the questions which even cabinet ministers now admit cannot indefinitely be neglected. It must be dealt with within a very short period of time. No other methods than ours would have brought about the result. You may have sentimental articles in magazines by the Chancellor of the Exchequer, who seems to be able to spare time from his ordinary avocations to write magazine articles telling you that militancy is a drag on the movement of women's suffrage. But our answer to that is, methinks our gentleman doth protest too much, because until militancy became to be known, neither Mr. Lloyd George nor any statesman, no, nor any member of Parliament ever thought it was necessary to mention the subject of women's suffrage at all. Now they mention it constantly to tell us what damage we have done to our cause. They're all urging us to consider the serious position into which we have brought the cause of women's suffrage. Well now, let me come to the situation as we find it. We felt we had to rouse the public to such a point that they would say to the government, you must give women the vote. We had to get the electors, we had to get the business interests, we had to get the professional interests, we had to get the men of leisure all unitedly saying to the government, relieve the strain of this situation and give women the vote. And that is a problem that I think the most astute politician in this meeting would find very difficult. We have done it. We are doing it every day. And I think when you take that fact into consideration, you'll realize why we have been attacking private property, why we have been attacking the property of men so absorbed in their business that they generally forgot to vote in ordinary elections, why we have attacked the pleasures of men whose whole life is spent in a round of pleasure, and who think politics so dull and so beneath their distinguished ossification that they hardly know which party is in power. All these people have had to be moved in order to bring enough pressure to bear upon the government to compel them to deal with the question of women's suffrage. And now that in itself is an explanation. I don't know whether I have used the domestic illustration in Hartford, but it is a very good one. It's quite worth using again. You have two babies, very hungry and wanting to be fed. One baby is a patient baby and waits indefinitely until its mother is ready to feed it. The other baby is an impatient baby and cries lustily, screams and kicks, and makes everybody unpleasant until it's fed. Well, we know perfectly well which baby is attended to first. And that's the whole history of politics. Putting sentiment aside, people who really want reforms learn that lesson very quickly. It's only the people who are content to go on advocating them indefinitely who play the part of the patient baby in politics. You have to make more noise than anybody else. You have to make yourself more obtrusive than anybody else. You have to fill all the papers more than anybody else. In fact, you have to be there all the time and see that they do not snow you under if you're really going to get your reform realized. Experience will show you. Oh, thank you.
Oh, no, I was just, if you come to a stopping point.
That might be a good place to stop, actually. We're right at the end of paragraph there.
Uh-huh. I really enjoyed your story because you're in England reading about the same thing that we thought about. You mentioned some dates. You all got suffrage earlier than we did in America because primarily white women get the right to vote in 1920. Maybe a few blacks in the North or something, but you mentioned 1967. That's in the South when really get massive rights to vote in this country. What dates did you mention in terms of when you all first got the right to vote, which was so much earlier than us? Women got the right to vote.
Well, it was 1928.
Oh, it was after us.
Yes.
Oh, yeah,
It was
y'all got it after
London.
us. And you mentioned the government of the people for the people. That's in our Constitution. Is it in your Constitution? Those words.
I think she was referring to your
It
constitution.
was referred to ours. Okay. Then I wanted to ask the children. She gave an analogy of two babies crying, one louder than the other. And she referred that to politics. Did that analogy resonate with you about who gets the attention, the loudest one, or did you hear that?
Did you know?
Any of you?
Did you hear the part when she was saying that the louder baby was heard? Mm-hmm. So
What did you say, Jacob?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I think it means that if you really say what you want and really put your mind into it, you'll get it. Like if you're doing an exam and you really put your mind into it, you'll probably pass it. So and people would listen.
Okay. Anybody else? Did you think about that analogy of the loudest person? Did you have, well, in school, have any of you read about women getting the right to vote? Is this story something that you learned in school before?
Yeah. So say it.
Yes.
Okay, you read about it in school?
Yes.
Say yes.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Anybody else read about it in school? You didn't read about it? Okay, well, look, I took so many notes. The notes that I took denied the rights, representation, citizenship rights, two evils, rise up, representation of taxation, Tea Party and Boston, which in America, public meeting questions. The fact that when the citizens ask questions in a parliament about women's suffrage, they were actually put out of the meeting. And it reminds me of two lawmakers in Tennessee who were expelled for speaking their piece about gun violence by another, you know, their two-party system, basically, because they didn't want to hear anything about gun rights, and that some of the women over there were attacking private property, and that's the whole thing about loud noises. The loud noise gets heard, and it was just very interesting. Go ahead.
That was how the representatives in Tennessee legislature, because they were acting because they had the natural hair, and they were rising and speaking, but they were loud and boisterous. And you are talking about these ones that just got it. That was just
right. I was referring that to her
Yeah.
story that she read was
Yeah.
about women's suffrage in England, and I just was she mentioned an analogy of two babies crying and the loudest baby getting the attention first in terms of, and that's how it is in politics. And can you give us a brief summary, Miss Jackie, of what you think about how they got the suffrage as well and what you read?
So would you like me to summarize what I just read?
Yes.
Okay. I think Emily Pankhurst was speaking at a meeting over in Hartford in Connecticut, and she had just explained she was trying to put across an explanation for why they were taking such militant methods for their campaign for women's suffrage. And she felt that if only people understood the reasons for why some people do things that seem really aggressive or violent, they will understand the need. So she was trying to use analogies that the people could relate to. So she spoke to the people in Hartford about how, imagine, she was trying to have them put themselves in the women's shoes. So she was explaining the scenario where, imagine if it was you and you had voted some people into power and you had some concerns, but then the people who were supposed to be representing you and your views just wouldn't listen or wouldn't do anything with them. If you had the right to vote, you could just not vote for them again and get rid of them. But if, like us women, you can't vote, then you're just stuck with them. So you now have a choice of two things. Either you just stick with it indefinitely, like the patient baby, or you do something. And I think that was her whole point of trying to explain that they had no choice in doing what they were now doing, which was some very radical things that they were doing at the time. And so I think that's all we got to in this part. She was just trying to almost justify the approach to what they were doing and why they were so aggressive in their tactics. Just really it was a choice of freedom or death is what she said.
And what was her nationality?
She was English. She was English.
English. Okay. 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 Well, very good. So, Vicky, what are you reading now?
Well, I'm not reading anything right now because I was trying to come back to the crossroads of Clarksdale. And we were getting into starting with the NAACP and the movements with Aaron Henry and Bertie McGee. And this was talking about how during the time that 55 with Emmett Till and they brought him up, and how it said, Mississippi situation, National NAACP referred to the crisis of 1955, focusing on the national attention and the condition rises in the state. In addition to Emmett Till and 3 other young Black males were murdered that year, widely publicized attacks. The emotions ran high, and there were whole worlds that seemed was increasingly watching. The NAACP in 1955, a pamphlet, M is for murder. M is for Mississippi and murder. Disseminated publicized this work and solicit supports, beleaguering the numbers of captured and the sentiment. Years later, Amazing Moore recalled it was real tough through the year for Mississippi. However, for all of those Black Mississippians reluctant to join the NAACP for fear of retaliation, many others found themselves drawn into the action. The murders it dissuaded some and empowered others. In 1954, official NAACP statistics put membership in Mississippi 3,101, up from 1950 from 1657 and 1953. No, I'm wrong. I got that wrong. It was 3,101, up from 1,067 in 1953. By 1955, the number had risen 4,639. Till's death particularly struck the state African American population lightning bolt. For some, it sparked a flame and drew them to the organization. Vera Piggy was drawn in it. She had just begun working in the youth council and had been elected to Coahoma County NAACP branch secretary when Emmett Till's trial in September motivated her to direct the action. Clarksdale served as a hub for reporters, covering the trial in nearby Sumner. McGee had felt compelled and funding justice for Till, grieving mother. She helped the NAACP comb the Delta for witnesses, approaching frightened strangers and gently asking questions. Once the trial began, Page accompanied U.S. Congressman Charles Diggs, Democrat from Michigan, to the courtroom each day, sitting with him and absorbing the energy around her. Later in the years, she attended the first Mississippi State NAACP conference in Jackson.
Now, who you were speaking of? Who are you talking about? I know Charles Diggs was the congressman from Detroit, but what woman are you talking about?
I'm sorry, I'm talking about Emmett Till's mother. She was
okay.
in the trial and the NAACP afterwards. Yeah, I was
Okay.
thinking of his mother.
Okay. And you can come to a stopping point in a minute since we.
Okay, I want to get through the trial right here and then finish asking questions. Once the trial began, Page accompanied the U.S. Congressman. Well, Piggy was accompanying the U.S. Congressman Charles Diggs in the courtroom each day, sitting with him, absorbing the energy surrounding her. Later in the year, she attended the first Mississippi State NAACP conference in Jackson, raised her hand to assist more, and was elected to the state youth conference, an advisor. I guess that's a stopping point right here.
Okay. So did you mention that after Emmett Till died, there was a great migration from Mississippi? Did you remember? Did you mention how many people left? I mean, was murdered
as 3,000, and it ended up as 1,000. That was afterwards, and the numbers had risen to 4,000. So numbers had beginning to bolt for some time. It sparked the flame that drove them to the organization. So apparently, when during the NAACP and the trial, 1,000 people had come to attend the trial and become a part of the NAACP, and they stayed up until that time. Now, growing up, everyone that was in town at the time that I was growing up, my mama's family, everybody left and went to Chicago. So that was when everybody was starting to leave town shortly afterwards.
What years were you talking about?
I was talking about in the 60s.
Okay, I guess. Okay. Are there any other questions to ask Vicky about? She read about Emmett Till and people organizing for rights in the South after he was murdered in the mid-50s.
Yes. Was Emmett Till known was known history in England? Was that taught in the history books in England? Are they still with us?
Yeah. They're turning the volume on.
Oh, okay.
No.
Oh, you were not talking about Emmett Till in England?
Want to sit down?
Of
I think American history comes as an option in A-level history.
I mean,
and
like,
so
next year at school we're learning about American history, like slaves and stuff.
So I don't know. Well, I have an older son who's not here now, and I don't know that they got into that much detail. But when they do, it'll be in what they call GCSE, the exams that they had when they were about 16, and that's when they'll be taught.
Was it in the history? Was there something in the history that was taught about the Emmett Till controversy?
Vicky, she said that her younger children had not studied it yet, but it is because American history is optional. But she has an older child; they have learned, and of course, Miss Jackie, you are familiar with Emmett Till as an adult.
Yes, but only barely. I didn't study history at school myself, really, when I was going through school.
You read it on your own about Emmett Till.
No. So I think it comes as almost it tends to be an option that people who focus on history, or depending on the school system, if you're going down the path of the arts, then you'll pick up history at that level. Or if you go down the science route, you may never come into, but the core history curriculum doesn't include that in it. It's only, I guess, for the students who choose to have history as an advanced level sort of subject.
But did you yourself, an adult, you're familiar with the Emmett Till case and his murder and his public, his mother making his torture and his casket public in Chicago in the late 50s? I think 55.
Yes, but I only came across that as an adult, yes.
I see what you're
just
saying.
my own reading, yes.
I see what you're saying. Okay, so we've come to the end. We have about 9 minutes left. So what I want to see is if we could let Maryam read, because we came back all the way to the beginning, a poem. Solomon read one page, and the other 2 children read one page, and everybody give us a brief summary. And I think our 8 minutes will be up by then. Could we do that? Okay, so you can read us a poem, Maryam, and give us a summary of your poem, and then we'll go to Solomon, then we'll go to Jacob and Ava.
Okay. So here's another one of my 6th grade poems.
What's the name of it?
It's called
Right, so do you want me to read first? Hold on. Miriam is reading.
Explore.
I didn't hear you. What'd you say, Miriam?
It's called explore.
Okay,
Explore and meet.
okay. Okay, you can read it.
Okay. The first day of school, not sure what's in store, a brand new teacher, and a whole lot more. Making new friends and seeing old ones too. What will we learn? I haven't had a clue. Will we learn about animals or outer space? Will we learn about writers? Or in the gym, will we race? I have so many questions about how this year will be. To a brand new adventure, we'll just have to wait and see. Okay, here's another one. The last night before my first day of sixth grade. It was the night before school starts, and all through the house, not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The backpacks were hung by the front door with care in hopes that in the morning they would soon be there. The children were relentlessly sleeping in bed while Mama, a million things rushed in her head. Once all were asleep, happy school dream arose with visions of friends, teachers, apples, and clean clothes. For in just a few hours the day would come, and all would awake to the bright morning sun. Kids would put on fresh clothes, new shoes, and a smile, and fidget and fumble with their nerves for a while. Then bravely stand up and smile and say, I'm ready to do this. Let's get on our way. Mama would take a few pictures and wipe a small tear, and long waiting for the first day of school was now here. Happy first day of sixth grade to all, and to all have a great first day.
Thank you. So the last night of my first day of sixth grade, tell us one thing about the last night before you started the sixth grade that's important in the poem.
Can you explain that again?
The name of your poem is The Last Night Before My First Day of Sixth Grade. What was important in the last night before you started the sixth grade in your poem?
Well, the most important thing is getting ready and making sure we got all of our school supplies that we need for all of our classes we have to take. Because I just found out that I'm going to have 6 classes all day. So I had to study a little bit. I had to pack my things, and I went to sleep very nervous because I was really nervous that I was going to mess up the next day.
Yeah.
But it went pretty good.
But you'll be glad to have those new clothes on and you looking fly. All right. Okay, so Jacob, you have a page to read?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Right. So basically, had a pig beside him and was standing as stiff as a ramrod, hand fixed to his temple in salute. At ease, the lieutenant said, "Observe, sir." Graf lowered his saluting arm, but he did not relax. The lieutenant never relaxed, thought absurd. He was like a coiled spring, waiting for action. The major's compliments to captain. He reported that machine gunners were in place and suggested that we mount up. He had received information that the British are preparing for a charge in our position. Pompous idiot, thought absurd. Receive information indeed. One only had to take a look at the British camp. through strong field glasses, like Sir had done, and the evidence was there for all those to see. But Major Clausen preferred to wait until he had positive intelligence, which usually meant a carrier pigeon arriving with remote strapped to its leg from one Clausen spies or a sighting from one of the aerial observer planes. Are the men ready? Yes, sir. Yes, are the men ready? They are, sir. Then let us join them. The men are indeed ready, standing stiffly to attention by their horses, dressed in their grey double-breasted tunics with the coloured plastron fronts, with a coloured sash over it, and their square-topped Polish-style lances, perhaps finely on their heads. This had been the style.
Okay,
And,
so give us a brief summary of what you, that page.
Want to summarize that?
it's the British soldiers getting ready. It's the British soldiers.
It's the German.
No.
It's the German.
Oh yeah, it was German soldiers getting ready to attack the British.
Okay, Abel.
But I wasn't here last year, so how could I have known? And no, you're not off the hook simply because you weren't here last year, Sabby said, as if she had read my mind. Maybe she had. What can you tell by the interaction? Look closely, she instructed me. I studied the girls. Now, that Shelby pointed it out. The two tan girls were talking animatedly, moving around their hand, laughing and talking over each other, while the other girl shifted uncomfortably from foot to foot, giving a polite smile every once in a while. She didn't know the story the others were telling, and she appeared a little jealous of it. Maybe Shelley was right. Wait, there's no maybe. She was right. Okay, one girl feels left out, but still, I can only see things once Shelby pointed them out. It was hard for me to put two and two together and basically nothing. Shelby continued to walk down the hallway while I tried to come up with some more deductions. Maybe she had an allergy and couldn't go. I took a stab in the dark.
Okay, very good. I heard you use a word, laughing. So what happened in this page that was different?
Did you ask why were they laughing?
Yes.
They were laughing. Well, they were like laughing because they had like a really good time at camp, and they're probably like looking back at the memories, what they did, and like maybe a funny time with like someone fell over, but they're laughing with them.
So they were having fun.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. So it ended well. You have a happy ending there. Well, fantastic. So I've enjoyed you all, and I look forward to hearing more about your stories next month, the first Saturday of the month. And thank you so much. And I wish I could be at your school to see you in your new clothes when you start school.
Thank
All
you.
right. Uh-huh. Well, you all have a wonderful weekend, and thank you for joining the Learning True Book Club. And y'all have a great day. All right, thank you. All right, see you guys later. Okay, that's what she always does.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Oh, turn off.